Welcome to the finish line with Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today I'd like to get done this heart table runner that I made a few weeks ago. And I'm going to do a free motion heart pattern. Now this is really an easy pattern. If you can do a heart or even a letter C, you are going to be able to do this pattern. We've got some swirls to get us out of some corners and just to make it a lot of fun. So the pattern is going to have some swirls. So we're going to swirl in and come right back out, and some hearts. But the hearts are not going to be complete hearts. We're going to come in and stop and then trace going back out. It's important that when we do that heart that we don't go back in, because it's a little bit harder to get out. But if we do, we can follow it out and put a swirl in. So what we're really doing are just these round shapes for both of those designs. So this is an all-over design, and you can change the size of the hearts. We're going to start with a heart, stop, and then go back around. And then take that end and give a swirl. You can go back up into a heart and then come out. Go back up, do a swirl, and if you find you're in an area that you don't want to do a heart, just do another swirl. Trace those swirls around until you get to an area where you can do another heart. If you find that you don't need a swirl in an area, well then don't add the swirl. But that swirl is going to give you a chance to get out of an area and to fill in a spot. We can travel and then go back. By adding a couple of those little swirls here and there, it's going to be able to get us in and out of areas that a heart won't work. So here's that heart table runner. It does have a very soft white with those red hearts. So I'm going to be using a glide thread called linen. It's a very soft white and really matches this background well. And I have the same in my bobbin. And this pattern you're going to be able to do on a domestic machine, but I will be doing it on my Q20. The first thing we need to do is bring up that bobbin thread so they're both up at the top. And I do like to do that in an area where the pattern is quite busy. And that way we're not going to see that starting or ending. If I started in a clear area like this fabric, it's more noticeable than on a busy pattern. So start in that busy pattern, pull up those threads, move them out of the way, anchor it with a couple of stitches. Now I'm going to do a little bit and I'll trim that thread off after. And I do like wearing gloves so I can grip that fabric. It won't matter what design you start with. You can start with a swirl or start with a heart. I always like to start with a swirl. It just gives me a little bit of movement to get into that rhythm. So I'm doing that swirl and then I'm coming right back out. Now I can move into a heart. And your hearts don't always have to have pointed ends. Some will have points and some will not. And it's very hard to see that heart here, but when I get into a lighter fabric, you're going to be able to see that. Do another swirl. And then get into a heart. I'm not finishing that heart shape. And you can see where that heart shape is repeating itself. The swirl, you can go in as much as you need and come out and stop wherever you need. So I have that one part of my heart. I have that second part. Now I'm going to trace over it, going towards the outside. And into another swirl. Here's an area where I can do a small little heart. And then bring it back into another swirl. When you come to some of these smaller sections, we're just going to kind of follow what we did before. So I can shadow that heart. And that's going to get me into this area. And then go right back out. You can always add some small swirls. So that that area is all filled in. There's an area in here that does need a little stitching. It's too small for a heart or a swirl, so I'm only going to do a little point and then come back. It will just duplicate some of the points on those hearts. So I'm going in, coming out, and then I will continue back out. So I have this little point, but it really just looks like part of a heart. And now I'm back out and able to make a little heart. Your little hearts can have some swirls on the end, and they can be very pointy or round. To anchor these edges down, I'm just going to kind of make waves. And that way they're stitching down and I'm coming right off onto this batting. So I'm coming up and down, so I'm right off the batting. Now I can travel along this batting, work my way up onto that quilt, and finish. So here was my starting thread, and I was able to do the whole thing without stopping and starting. Yes, I did go onto this quilt batting and then traveled and came back on. Follow in to fill in those areas, and you can make these little points just to fill in those little areas. Of course, on the light fabric, you can see the hearts better than the print fabric. But as a glance, it all has that beautiful little hearts and swirls. And the back has a beautiful doily print on it, and you don't notice any of the quilting at all. So we don't need to worry about that back. So the quilting is all done. The last thing I need to do is trim that off and put some binding on. I'll put a picture of this quilt finished with that binding in my newsletter if you do want to check it out. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're working on next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.